Hi, my name is Gabriela Ayala, and today I'm going to walk you through this open source New York Times app and talk about core data, what it is, and how it works. So over here I have this simulator, and it shows, if I scroll down, I can see these different articles. And down here I can basically see different categories, and according to my interests, what it does, it connects to the New York Times API, and it displays a list view of articles filtered by that category. So if I click on an article, it's gonna display a web view for that specific article, and in my case, it already recognizes my IP address, and so it knows that I've already exceeded the limit per month of free articles. Then up here on the right corner, there's a bookmark icon which I can click, and so it's gonna tell me that I've added it to a bookmark. And if I go back, I can go to this folder icon, and it's gonna show me a list view of my bookmarks. I can swipe to the left to delete a bookmark, or I could also just click on any one of those bookmarks, and it's gonna take me back to those articles. So that's an overview of the app that I'm gonna go through, and now we're gonna head over to the code. But before that, I kind of want to take a step back and go and find out what is core data, so we kind of have a sense of that before we dig into the code and make sense of it. For that, I'm heading over to my browser, going to developer.apple.com, heading to the search bar, and gonna type in core data. Then I'm selecting the first option, and I'm choosing this one, and it basically says, use core data to save your application's permanent data for offline use, to cache temporary data, and to add undo functionality to your app on a single device. So what it does is it adds persistence to my app, and if you go down here, it kind of tells you how that works. It has this data modeling, tells you about a modeling data, a core data model, and how that works. And it tells you a little bit, for example, about the different fetch requests. I'm bringing this up because it's going to come into play in the code I'm going to show you. So look at this, for example, the NS fetch request. It says a description of search criteria used to retrieve data from a persistent store. So essentially, core data is a framework that Apple provides so that we can persist data and the user can have a better experience, so that when they log back into the app, whatever interaction they had or saved, in this case, the articles that they bookmarked are still there and they're not gone. Okay, so with that in mind, let's head over back to our code. Okay, so on the left here, we have our app organized into different folders, and it gives us a sense of how the code is gonna be organized. I wanna start with the data model because that sets up the core data model, and how that's gonna be set up is gonna be key for the rest of the application. So going into the model, we have this core data model folder, and I'm gonna go into this CD article class, moving this a little bit to the right. You can see this is a very simple file. It's just importing core data, and it's creating this class called CD or core data article. We have to think that article here is the key data model, because we're thinking about the New York Times app, and it's essentially retrieving or saving articles. And so that's inheriting from this NS managed object. What is that? So to find out, we can hover over this by holding the option key and clicking. If we do that, it says a base class that implements the behavior for a core data model object. It also tells us that a managed object has an associated entity description, and that it represents the name. It represents and the names of its attributes and relationships. So we know that we expect to see attributes and relationships related to this data model class. So where do we find that? We can move on and probably check out the next file over here in the core data model that says CD article core data property. So we go over to that. I'm not sure in this case why the author decided to separate these two, as the code, is very short. It could have gone within the same class. But in any case, what he or she is doing is doing an extension of the core data article class. And the first thing that they're doing is doing a fetch request. Remember how I said there's the NS fetch request, the one that's over here. And it's search criteria used to retrieve data from a persistent store, which is basically what core data is. And so what it's doing, it's returning that fetch request instance, and it's returning a core data article. The second thing to point out over here is that we're using the NS managed public vars, and these are used to declare the properties of the core data article class. And so this allows core data to manage the persistence of those properties so they can be stored in a database like object and loaded back into memory. And so what we're seeing is that they're article related properties, the author, ID, what's the subtitle, the image, all aspects that we would associate with an article. And thirdly, we have this function set from. What it does is it's taking an article instance, and it sets the values of the core data article attributes to match that value. So in summary, this extension makes it easy to create and manage core data article instances by providing a way to fetch them from the persistent store. And it's also a convenient way to set their attribute values from article instances. Now I'll go over very quickly through the rest of the model file. So category is what you would expect. It just sets the categories we saw in the app and the corresponding URLs that are going to link to the to the New York Times API for each category. Bookmark simply is gonna associate each article to a corresponding bookmark by a specific identification. And then the article, again, is just creating specific attributes related to that article that identify it uniquely, such as title, subtitle, author, and the image. Now, moving on to the view model, we can think of two of them. There's the article view model and the bookmark view model. So the article view model, just very quickly as a summary, is just showing or summarizing how the articles are loading. And then the bookmark view model, it is acting as a type of mediator between the UI and the data storage layer. And by that I mean that it's providing essentially functions to insert and delete the different bookmarks. As you can see, delete bookmarks down here, or saying the bookmark already exists and it's been added to the bookmark. So what it's doing, it's just handling the functionality for the bookmarks and nothing else. Now we can move over to the repository. This is more related to our core data subject. And this is very important really when you're doing core data. What it does is essentially it's providing a series of methods that are fundamental to interact with the core data or core database as such. So as you can tell, for example, it's checking where the article exists. It's providing a function for inserting the article, functions to update the article, functions to delete the article, or to delete all the articles that are in the storage. In fact, if we option key over here to the NS manage object context, it says an object space to manipulate and track changes to managed objects. A context consists of a group of related model objects that represent an internally consistent view of one or more persistent stores. Changes to managed objects remain in memory in the associated context until core data saves the context to one or more persistent stores. So essentially, to summarize, this bookmark repository provides an abstraction layer between the data model and the database, and it encapsulates the details of the core data stack and the underlying storage mechanism. And so by doing that, it makes it easier for the rest of the application to be able to work with the database. Finally, we can move towards the views or the view controllers, which is what the user actually sees, and how the user and it also handles the user interactions. As you would expect, there are many different views, and that's what I showed you at the beginning of the app, going from the category selector, the news feed, or the bookmarks view, or the web view, which is when you see a specific article. I'm going to go into the bookmarks view because that's the one that relates specific to the core data example that I'm talking about. As we can see here, we're getting sort of into a pattern when we use core data. First thing we do is we import core data. Second thing we tend to do is that we do a fetch request. So we're fetching all the saved, or we're fetching rather all the fetch results, fetching all those articles and saving them as in this variable called saved articles. Then we're also, saving the bookmark view model into a variable, and that is within an observed object. So what is an observed object? We can do option key and click. And so it tells us that it's a property wrapper type that subscribes to an observable object and invalidates a view whenever the observable object changes. So it also says that you can add this attribute to a parameter of a Swift UI view when the input is an observable object and you want the view to update when the object's published properties change. What does that mean? In summary, it's a way of keeping track or literally observing when the bookmark view model changes. And so whenever there's a change in the bookmark view model, this bookmark view is automatically updating. So going back to the view model, if the user adds a bookmark or deletes a bookmark, then automatically that's detected by the bookmark view, and automatically that would be reloaded in the view and the user would see it. Finally, just to explain how that works, over here it's where it's building the view, and so it's creating a list, iterating over each of the saved articles, which come from the fetch results that come from the core database, and it's displaying each of these articles in a navigation link type of view. In a news feed view type of view, and that's gonna be specified in this code over here. It's just so that it's consistent with the rest of the app, so that it looks like a news feed. And then of course it gives the option to delete the bookmark, which is further explained by this function delete bookmark on the bottom here. So that's it for the video today. Essentially, how a core data model works is that you have to define it in the data model somewhere. You create a base core data model. You have to define the class and its properties, how it's gonna work, as well as its characteristics. Then you do need something similar to this bookmark repository, where you define the key methods of how you're gonna interact with that repository or core database. And then essentially you can start using the view controllers, such as the bookmarks view, to start fetching the data that is saved in that database, and use it to display it and update it, and basically call on those methods to update it as you will based on the user interactions. That's it for the video. Hope it was useful and you learned something new. Thank you.